Hey all, Heretic here, and today on the Battlegrounds, we're covering Elementals. We're gonna go over everything, the minions, the spells, the strategies, whatever it takes to make it so we can win with Elementals. Let's get right into it. Now, let's talk all things Elementals. We're gonna start with mostly the minions and look at what we could do. We're gonna cover them all from tier 1 to 7, so if you don't need this, maybe skip ahead to the next section, unless you just wanna dive in and learn. We're gonna start with the Dune Dweller. Yeah, it's tier 1, it's a 3/2. When you sell this, Elementals in the tavern have +1/+1 this game. My advice for you is don't buy this. Almost never ever buy this. Leave it in the shop, leave it alone, generate it and then sell it. Don't pay gold for this. Molten Rock is a 3/3. After you play an elemental, gain +1 health. Not a horrible starting minion, not a great minion. It can stay on your board for a little while as you cycle a couple elementals, but ultimately, typically, with the exception of a couple builds, you are not going to be keeping this. Stepping up to tier 2, we're going to start with the Party Elemental. This 3/2, after you play an elemental, give a friendly elemental other than it +2/+1, means if you think you're going to be cycling at any point elementals, you're going to be buffing them a decent bit. Now, it's not going to buff the one you're playing, it's buffing everything else. So keep in mind what targets are available. If there's one elemental you don't want to buff on the board, kick that out as soon as you get ready to play the next one, because you don't want to waste putting stats on something you're going to get rid of. This can stay on your board through the mid game. There's some rare exceptions for the late game when it gets too big to get rid of, but otherwise, a good solid early minion for direction. The Celemental is a 3/3. When you sell this, get a 3/3 elemental. Fantastic elemental that you want to cycle for economy to trigger all those various buff minions you're going to have. This is a mainstay of elemental boards. Often it's well worth buying this because it only really costs you 1 gold after you sell both forms. And however you're buffing your elemental board, this is usually really easy value. Just remember, you can triple the second part of the elemental, the droplet, just as easily as the first part. But when you triple the Celemental, it's going to give you 2 droplets. So you can easily print triples of both forms of them. Just be careful of the numbers you have of each if you're trying to print triples of the water droplets. The Fireballer is a 4/3. When you sell this, give your minions +1 attack, improve your future ballers. This will improve whatever type of baller by 1 permanently every time you sell one. So 1, 2, 3, you get the idea. Fantastic minion, great for almost every build. Hey, maybe your board just needs attack. Maybe your board needs just a little bit of scaling and you're cycling this anyways, why not? And at tier 2, this is a fantastic stat line at 4/3. This is a mainstay of elemental builds for cycling. The Snowballer is a 3/4 elemental. When you sell this, give your minions +1 health, improve your future ballers. Same idea as the fire, except now you're buffing the health, but remember they're buffing each other. It doesn't matter what type of ballers you play, they buff them all, so get cycling those balls. Moving to tier 3, we've got the Felemental. This 3/3 elemental demon available in both types of lobbies. Battlecry minions in the tavern have +1/+1 this game. Works with Rylak, works with Brand, works with Young Murkai, works with certain hero powers, but otherwise typically not worth your time to buff the shop with this. When the new meta arrives, whatever it might be, there might be a world where this is good again, but right now this is not a really good minion. You generate it for free, it's fine, but you don't usually want to spend much gold on this unless you have a damn good reason through hero power or just good triples to say, oh, I can abuse this immediately. Wildfire is a 6/3. After this attacks and kills a minion, deal excess damage to an adjacent minion. Now, this is typically called a cleave, but it's a conditional cleave because you have to kill what you hit to then deal excess damage to only one side, and it's random which side, so you don't even get to control that. Typically, this is not great. Depends what your opponent is and how much you can buff it. Obviously, if you're fighting an undead board with low health and high attack, you can get some value out of this. But conversely, if you're fighting a giant elemental board, it's going to have to be buffed a lot to do anything. So it really depends who you're fighting, if this is good and how big you can make it. If it's gold, it attacks both sides, and yeah, if it's huge in gold, it'll work against most everything. But still, it's kind of a situational minion if it's good or not. Refreshing Anomaly is a 3/4 Battlecry. Gain 2 refreshes that cost 0. Now, This does work with Bran. It will stack. So while you have 2 refreshes after you play this, if you play it with a Bran, you'll have 4 free refreshes. And yes, if you triple this and you have a Bran, it gives you 8 refreshes. So keep track. You're going to be getting used to not paying for rolls for a little bit, and all of a sudden be, oh no, I'm paying again for rolls. It's a really good minion. I love buying this often when I'm playing elementals because 1, it triggers all those buff abilities we have that are going to be taking advantage of it being an elemental. And then it gives us those 2 refreshes, which means it's a steal on the cost. Sleeping Sea Glass is a 4/4. Choose 1. Double this minion's attack or health. Now this card, if found early and if you have the right minions, is amazing. If you have any buffs in hand, say you have Spellcraft or Blood Gems, any minion that will buff something and you can buff it while it's in the shop and then you buy it, when it doubles those stats after you play it, that's permanent. So definitely take advantage of this. If you're playing Sleeping Sea Glass, take a look at the other minions in the shop and see if there's some way you can get excessive stats early to let this carry you. Now that being said, always double the health in the early game because that's what you need, not attack. Bountiful Bedrock is a 3/4. At the end of every 2 turns, get a random elemental. That is amazing. This is one of the bedrocks of the elemental build, pardon the pun. And it is very, very good. Yeah, that turn you play, it's just a 3/4, not insane stats. But that next turn when you get an elemental, that feels pretty nice. When this is gold and it starts kicking out 2 elementals a turn, really, really nice. If dragons are in and you have an efficient engineer appear in the shop and you have a gold one, there are times when you can target it and when you can't. If it's the turn it's activating and it's going to give you the minions at the end of your turn, it will then give you those elementals if you use an efficient engineer. But if it's a turn where it's not going to give them and you target it, it won't do anything. So don't do that. Don't use the efficient engineer on this unless you see that it's activated and ready to go. And don't forget Drakari also functions just fine with this minion, and yes, works in conjunction with efficient engineer for even more free elementals. Looking at tier 4 now, Nomi Kitchen Nightmare is a 4/4 neutral, only in elemental lobbies. After you play an elemental, elementals in the tavern have +1/+1 this game. And I've got bad news for people. Nomi's bad. Nomi's really, really bad. People love Nomi because Nomi used to be a lot of fun, but with the way things have worked out and power creep in the game, Nomi is just not good enough anymore. They're too slow. Maybe if it was at tier 2 or 3, it'd feel fine. At 2, yeah, I think most people could get on board with Nomi. Even at 3, it feels a little like, not really great minion. If you're expecting to see a build at the end with this, you're not. But if you want to play Nomi, it's not hard. Cycle a lot of elementals. They get big in the shop and you get more. That's all there is to it. Little Rag is a 4/4. After you play an elemental, give a friendly minion stats equal to the elemental's tier. Now, this is a fantastic minion. Elementals are built around cycling a lot of cards. Little Rag's going to sit there and throw stats randomly all over the board. And that is an advantage of that. It doesn't care what tribe minions are on your board, or a disadvantage depending how you want to look at it, because you can use Little Rag to buff anything. He's just going to throw those stats based on the tier of the minions that are being played randomly everywhere. A very good minion if you're doing a lot of cycling. Icaron the Protector is a 3/1 elemental with Divine Shield that reads, after you play an elemental, give it Divine Shield until next turn. Now, obviously, 3/1 stat line on tier 4, not exactly stellar. Temporary Divine Shields for the elementals you summon, not bad, but not crazy. But if you golden Icaron via normal triples, Eyes of the Earth Mother, now when you play an elemental, it gets permanent Divine Shield. Now that is another conversation. That is a much better minion to have. Giving permanent Divine Shields to all of the elementals you summon during the game is a massive advantage. So yes, initially not great, but if you invest a little time into it, this thing will be a monster that makes your board so much stronger. Windfall Tornado is a 4/4 that reads, when you sell this, discover an elemental and give it this minion's stats. That means if your shop is buffed at all, if maybe this was on your board, Ragnaros threw little stats all over this thing, and now you're like, I don't really want to get rid of this. Don't worry, because when you sell it, you're going to get to discover another elemental, and all of those stats are going to be added to it. So it's a big value. Now, it could offer you 3 complete garbage elementals that those stats will be wasted on, but typically it's going to offer you something you want, especially in the mid game. It's not going to be wasted stats. It always feels good, but in the late game, it can be problematic. But even then, it's not a big deal. Elementals get pretty big pretty fast in the later game. Fantastic minion. If you're playing elementals, you always want to get these. Temperature Shift is a tier 4 gold tavern spell. Get a fireballer and a snowballer. So for 4 gold, you're guaranteed to get one of each of the ballers. Now, remember to pay attention. If you've got other ballers in play, you probably don't want to accidentally triple them. I don't think I mentioned this in the baller section itself, but tripling ballers, if you're playing elementals, is usually not worth it, because if you sell 3 ballers, you're going to give +3 attack or +3 health, whatever, what type they are, to that buffing. But when you sell a tripled one, it only gives +2. So it's not really worth doing the triple end of it unless you're not actually playing elementals and you just need the triple to find direction and power. Looking at tier 5, we've got the Dancing Barnstormer. Now, this is a 5/4 with Battlecry and Death Rattle elementals in the tavern at +2/+2 this game. So it works with Bran, it works with Titus. Is it good? Well, the problem is not for long if it is. Like, if you have a Bran or a Titus with this and you have it for a couple turns, that's fine at, say, turns 7 to 8. But after that, its buffing isn't really going to matter. So is it good? Not horribly good at tier 5 for the purposes of staying on your board. But for that brief window, it's got a good stat line. It does give a decent buff. And then cycling it later as you generate them for free, that's fine. It's perfectly okay with that. It's not a bad minion, little awkward. Gentle Jin is a 3/4 taunt, Battlecry, and Death Rattle. Get a random elemental. So this one's a big deal as you're cycling elementals. Even if you're not going to keep it on your board, especially if you have a Bran in play, throw this thing down. It's basically free. It's going to Battlecry out 2 more elementals, sell it, get your buffs, be happy. Otherwise, keep it on your board. Typically, you don't see elementals running, say, a Titus Rivendare and going for the Death Rattle ending. The Bran, typically you're going to see elementals running that, but it does fit nicely in that regard on your board. This is a very good elemental to have on your board to help you generate minions very consistently, since it's going to be your taunt, probably going to die, and if it doesn't, congratulations, you've won. Twilight Primordium is a 2/2 that reads Battlecry. Give an elemental +2/+2, improved by each other minion you played this turn. Now, there's some important qualifiers with this card. It only buffs elementals, but you can play anything, any minions at all of any type, to buff the buff it's going to give. So cycle anything you want, just make sure you play this last. Yeah, it works really well with a Bran. Throw it out there, tons of stats. Is this good? Well, it depends. Let's think about this. If you're going to tier 4 and you triple into a 5 and this is one of the rewards, no, it's garbage because it's not going to give much of a buff. But if you go to tier 5 and you played, say, 10, 12 cards and you have a Bran, this is amazing. You get to tier 6, you start cycling lots and lots of cards, you generate this thing, just play it last, big value. Always remember, play it last for maximum benefit. Taking a look at tier 6, we're going to start with Arid Atrocities. It's a 7/7 Death Rattle, summon a 7/7 Golem, improved by each friendly minion type that died this combat. Well, if you're playing an elemental board, this is not a good card. Typically, reason for that is easy. You're playing one tribe plus an Arid Atrocity. That means it's only going to get a little buff. It's not really worth having on your board. You triple into it early enough and you have a couple other tribes. Yeah, use this thing for the power that it is, but you're going to cut it pretty fast if you're winning with elemental. Nether Construct is a 4/4 elemental demon. So in both lobbies, choose one. Minions in the tavern have +4/+4 this game, or consume all the minions in the tavern to gain their stats. Typically for an elemental board, this is not something you want. Now, if you have buffed the shop off a lot, yes, consuming the shop with the second half of this choose is definitely an option to give you some value, especially if you happen to suddenly find yourself looking at a couple of these and the spell that can make a third. Yeah, can be very good. Typically, though, this is more of a demon minion. I have seen it. I have made it work on elemental boards, but it's more of an afterthought because it can work than something you're actively going to be seeking out to do. The Elemental of Surprise is an 8/8 elemental divine shield. This minion can triple with any elemental. So here is the deal. You just need 2 of any elemental and this, or 2 Elemental of Surprise and something else, and that will be a triple. Now, the issue with the Elemental of Surprise is, well, we generate elementals randomly. So guess what doesn't feel good when you triple some garbage minion you just wanted to throw away with an Elemental of Surprise. So you got to be careful when you're hanging on to these and you're trying to set something up, because you can very much accidentally lose it. It's unfortunate when it happens, but kind of the nature of the Elemental of Surprise. Hell, it's kind of in their name. The key of this minion, though, is it gives something divine shield. This is why you really want to get it on the right minion, as opposed to not really worrying about it and just enjoying the easy triple. That divine shield is often a big deal. The 1 Amalgam Tour Group is a 6/7 all-type minion. Whenever you play a card, give friendly minions of its tier or lower +1/+1 is fantastic for elemental boards, typically the earlier you find it. The reason for that is easy. Elemental boards want to cycle a lot of cards. 1 Amalgam Tour Group is an elemental. Every time you play a card, it's going to buff everything of that tier and lower, and you can start cycling a lot of cards in an elemental board, and this can give you a ton of value. Definitely work a 1 Amalgam Tour Group into any elemental board. You'll be just fine. Ultraviolet Ascendant is a 5/3 that reads, start of combat, give your elementals +2/+1 upgrades after you play an elemental. Now, is this good or not? And the answer is relatively simple. Did you triple into this? It's the end of your turn. This is the only elemental you've played. Not really good, because you're playing it. It's like, well, you haven't played any other elementals. I'm a 5/3. Did you play this? Do you have a brand? Did you play 10 elementals? Because all of a sudden, elementals are amazing. All of them. Just remember, this has to be on your board. This isn't like some other cards where wherever they are. This doesn't count all the elementals you played. It only counts the ones where it's on the board. So if you mess up and you get this, you start cycling cards because you're all excited because you're going to make a massive Ultraviolet Ascendant board. It's not going to work. You need to have this on your board while you're cycling those cards. Now, there's going to be moments where it isn't quite, you have the wrong number, you have too many cards, you don't have space for things, and it's going to be a little awkward, so you might have to play a couple out, but that's okay, as long as you get the majority of them, and then you start cycling going forward. This card right now, I would say, is probably the most powerful card in the Elemental toolkit. If you look at all the different elementals, this thing just requires you to get it and then start playing elementals, and it buffs them all on the board every time you play them. It is insane how big your board can get from this thing. And this is definitely right now the thing that elemental players are looking for. So try to get this as early as possible and start cycling elementals immediately. Finally, we take a look at tier 7. We're going to wander over to the Granite Guardian. This 128 has taunt. Whenever this is attacked, reduce the attacker's health to 1. Is occasionally good. Sometimes, every now and then, you can put a Divine Shield on this thing. Your opponent has another giant minion that runs into it. It suddenly has 1 health, and it dies. And a second minion runs into it, and yep, you got it. It's got 1 health, and it dies. And in those moments, it feels great. But then there's all the token boards. There's all the beasts. There's all the undead players. There's just the mechs who's got throwaway minions who doesn't care. It depends who you're fighting if this is going to be good. So really, before you invest anything in this, make sure you look at the other tribes being played. If you're in a top 5 situation and you generate this, and 4 of them are undead and beasts, you're the 5th elemental, maybe not waste your time with this. If you notice that only 1 of them is undead and you think you got a good shot about fighting the other people to make sure you're getting a top 3 at least, then yeah, Granite Guardian could work for you. Depends what other minions you have and what you can set up, but it can do the job, but definitely not an exciting tier 7 minion. Now it's time for Chat's Wisdom. We're going to rename this. We have a new title that was given by Porch Civ 6, which I enjoy. It's called Chattable Moments in History. I feel like there should be some classical music playing. I should be speaking in a heavy, rich English accent, but unfortunately, I cannot do that. I have this silly voice I do, and that's kind of all I've got other than the whole Boston thing that I can do if I try not, I gotta think not to do it because now I'm trying to do it accidentally because now my accent's just showing now. We gotta stop that. Let us jump in. If you want your wisdom, things you've seen that would really help the community get better at the game, please leave them in the comments below, the Discord, on the Twitch, wherever you leave them. I'll make sure I capture them. We've got a 3 for now. All 3 of these came in one game. Gives you kind of an idea of where the chat's mind was. First, we've got from P2G, find Rylak sooner equals sage advice. Wise. From Commander Keen, we have, or avoid fighting the strongest player in the lobby. Huh. Had never thought about that. Maybe if we simply chose to always fight the weakest player repeatedly, we'd win more games. Damn it, that's why Jeef wins so much. We need this information. Tino Fago said, or fight the dead guy more often. Wise, wise chat. These are the things we will learn from our community. They will give us the edges to win the game. Please let us know your wisdom. All right, folks, it's time to talk elemental builds. We're going to talk about how we put all the minion spells, all these tactics we can use together and actually win us some games. Now, right off the bat, you're going to go, wait, why is there only one build here? Where's the other 8? And they're all kind of weird variations of the same thing. Cycling elementals as fast as possible. Now, you're also going to say, where's my Nomi build? And in case you skipped ahead past the minion breakdown, Nomi build is, hey, find Nomi. Hey, play elementals. Get elementals. Finish 6th place. Welcome to the Nomi build. If you want to win games, don't play Nomi. Can you win games with Nomi? Yes. Have I been on, say, turn 6, seen 2 Nomis in my first shop and said, nope, not good enough. It's just not good enough. It's a little slow. Can you make it work? Can you show me someone with a video where they won with Nomi? Yes. Could you also show me a trail of broken players' dreams with 8th place, 6th place finishes because they tried to play Nomi? A lot easier to accomplish that feat, I think. So we're going to stick with the APM Elemental build because really it's the build elementals thrive at. As soon as they find certain pieces for, they start getting excited, and once they have the whole build, they're kind of hard to stop in most lobbies because they get really big. But it's also a good bit of work. You're cycling a lot of cards, you're making a lot of decisions, so if you screw it up, it's definitely something you cannot have work out for you. But hey, Heretic, you also didn't cover the Trade Pricks Gallywix build where I sit on tier 2, and I'm going to tell you the reason I didn't is because it's better to just tier up with that build too. Can it work? Yes. Is it a fun Mimi build? Yes. Does it win consistently 1st place? No. Because you're ultimately going to lose out to people who can venom you and knock off what couple shields you pick up from Elementals. So we're not going to cover that really either. If you have questions, please ask them in the comments. We can work on it. Hell, I'll do a whole video just on that, a quick hitting video, just to cover that if you need it. But ultimately, the build we want to do is this build. And when do we think we're playing this build? I'm going to say it's the moment you find both Gentle Jhin and Brand. Hopefully you have the Brand first, because it's nice to play that Jhin, get the extra elementals. But if you already have any other elementals, this build just kind of puts itself together. And then the last main piece of this build you're going to need, and as soon as you find Ultraviolet Ascendant, you're basically an elemental build. If you have any health, any economy, just any kind of time to get this going, you're gonna be hard to stop because this thing tears up ridiculously fast, especially if you have a Brand, because you just have to play elementals and it buffs everything on your board that's an elemental. It's ridiculous. You can just put down a fresh, brand new elemental, and if this thing's buffed up enough, it's gonna buff it to be massive and easily win you games. It is incredibly hard to stop this board once it's steamrolling along because you just have to play cards and they win. It's pretty brutal. I would expect it to get nerfed a little bit in some way in the coming future, but at the same time, I find it so enjoyable to play because of the cycling and you have to find the right pieces, where I kind of hope they just leave it where it is because it's just a good feeling build that's fun to play for me. I don't know about you. What do you think? Tell me, is this build fun for you, or do you think it's kind of cheesy and you don't really enjoy it? I just like the APM aspect of it. Well, we've got the main pieces of the build. What are the other things we're looking for? It's going to be things like Icaron the Protector. Why? Because they're a 3/1 with Divine Shield that is going to give Divine Shield to elementals when you play them. And also, if you triple Icaron, his Divine Shields he gives are permanent. Now, the problem with this is because typically you're going to triple this after you've already established a lot of your minions. It's not going to be as good as it could be. But if you find the spell Eyes of the Earth Mother, the ability to make this gold relatively early for a lot of gold is kind of worth it for permanent divine shield across your board. So you definitely want to consider that if you could see an Icaron and an Eyes of the Earth Mother, especially if it's relatively early. Otherwise, triplet the old-fashioned way, don't worry about it. It's still a divine shield minion that does work. Little Rag, well, we're going to be cycling lots of cards. Little Rag says, hey, you're cycling elementals. Let me buff random minions on your board. Just be careful you're not buffing things you don't care about. If you can, cut those fast. One of my favorite minions, and I definitely overvalue this minion and use it in a lot of builds. Basically all the time, it's a build unto itself for me, is one Amalgam Tour Group. If you've already established that you have a brand, that means any battle cry you play has the ability to multiple times buff your board. Yeah, it's probably not going to buff everything because you're not cycling that many tier 6 battle cries, but still, I just love one Amalgam Tour Group. This thing is fantastic, buffing your board constantly and just putting in the work. And oh yeah, it's an elemental, so it's going to benefit from all the buffs from your Ultraviolet Ascendant. And because it's an all-type minion, you can put whatever kind of tribe-specific thing you want on it, as it can absorb them all. And finally, I have to say, of the minions that we're going to want to have on our board permanently, although you're never going to see them typically, is going to be the Elemental of Surprise. Because you only need 2 of any elemental to triple it with the Elemental of Surprise, and you're generating a lot of elementals. This thing is a very big value for you, especially if you haven't found the Icaron, because now you have Divine Shield on things you care about. Now, when it comes to the minions we want to be cycling a whole bunch to get maximum output, all the value we can, we're going to be cycling ballers. Fire, snow, I don't care. Play as many as you can. Sell them. They're not going to give you a big return on investment early, but the deeper that game goes, the more cards you generate, the more cards you cycle. Amazing. Refreshing Anomaly, especially if you have that brand, is giving you 4 refreshes when you play it with that. And that's just easy value. It's going to trigger all your buffs, and it's going to give you all those rerolls. Elemental, it's going to give you 2 elementals you get to play for 3 gold. And essentially, in the end, that's 1 gold if you're just cycling, so easy value there. Windfall Tornado, we're going to play it, we're going to sell it, and then we're going to get to discover an elemental we need. Massive value, especially if you generate these randomly. It's just going to help you get those triples or those baller buffs you need, get them rolling as quickly as possible. Twilight Primordium, you're going to be cycling a lot of cards in this build if you're doing well. If you're giving 20, 40 buff from this thing and you have a brand and it doubles, that really cannot overstate the value of this minion, especially if you have anything with Divine Shield. You tag it with all these extra stats and it's just a monster. This thing, people aren't ever going to know it was on your board, but they're going to have felt its presence after you're done beating them with that stick. Now, when it comes to spells, well, we've already talked about Eyes of the Earth Mother, Hired Headhunter, because so many of these very good elementals are battle cries. That's going to help you get more value. Temperature Shift is probably one of the best because if you are cycling a lot of ballers, 4 gold, but you're going to get 2 elementals. So at worst case scenario, it's costing you 2 gold after you sell these, but then you get their buff plus whatever elemental theme buff you're getting from the minions on your board. So just cheap value. This build is a lot of fun. This is one of my favorite ways to play the game, cycling as many cards as possible and just smashing my opponent with giant minions. It's satisfying. It's not subtle. You're hitting them with a rock while they're trying to beat you with a scalpel. Have fun. All right, that's it. That's everything. We've covered elementals ad nauseum, and I'm tired. I don't want to talk about elementals anymore. I want to go play some games. I want to cycle some cards. I want to have some fun, damn it. Let's go, elementals. Thanks for watching all. I hope you had a good time. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It helps the channel grow. It just feels personally satisfying for me, and I want to hear what you're thinking. I love making these things, but if you don't tell me what you think, if you don't tell me, hey, you're a genius, or hey, you're an idiot, how do I know? I need you to let me know. I don't have any value unless you tell me. No, I'm kidding. Please, please, please keep it to a minimum. Thanks for watching all. I hope you had a great time. Thank you very much for watching. And until next time, have a good one. Later. All right, we're starting playing elementals that are those things. So get juggling. No. So start cycling those ballers. Slow, and unless you have a hero power that enables it